before I retired 2 years ago, I was a lawyer in Harrisburg for 41 years. And I was a trial lawyer, so most of the memorable decisions in my life were not decisions that I made, but they were ones that were delivered to me by a judge or a jury in a courtroom. And I can tell you that the moments of standing at the counsel table and watching a jury come back into the jury box, and you know that they have their verdict and they're going to read it, those are some of the most intense moments I ever experienced. And a friend of mine who's also a trial lawyer discussed it with me, and I thought he had a good description. He said, when that moment comes, you know that there's going to be drinking soon. You just don't know whether it's going to be happy drinking or sad drinking. So, and that was really true. So I thought back over all these verdicts and decisions that I had received over the years in court, and I tried to think which would make the best story. And one kept coming up in my mind, and ironically it was one where I was not the attorney, and you'll understand why in a moment. It was a case you probably know about, and maybe you watched it as fervently as I did. And that was the case of the people of California versus O.J. Simpson. And that case took place between January and October of 1995. And during that trial, about this time of year, in May of 1995, I got a call from a friend of mine who was a lawyer at a much larger firm than mine in Harrisburg, and he invited me to join his firm's OJ pool. And he knew me, he knew I was gonna join any pool that he invited me to, but he explained to me what the rules were. It was one entry per person, $20 an entry, and to make an entry, you had to predict the date of the verdict, because the trial was dragging on and everybody could tell it was going to take a long time. And you had to predict whether the verdict was going to be guilty or not guilty. So I said, put me down, and I looked at my calendar and I kind of thought about what I knew about the trial so far, and I looked at how long I thought it might take, and then I just sort of out of thin air picked a date, October 3rd. And because of some articles I had read and some intuition I had from watching some of the trial myself, I predicted not guilty. So we went on through the summer watching this trial and getting closer and closer to the date I had picked. And lo and behold, on October 2nd, the day before the day I had picked, my friend called me. He said, I don't know if you heard, but the jury came back with a verdict already. It had only had the case for a day, but they came back that Monday, October 2nd, with a verdict. And Judge Ito announced that the verdict would be read the following day on October 3rd. So my friend said to me, you're in luck, Mike. It's down to you and one other guy. You both picked October 3rd, and so he picked guilty and you picked not guilty, and whichever way the verdict goes, that'll determine who wins the pot. I said, great, how many people in this pool? He said, we cut it off at 150. So there's $3,000 in the pool. I said, okay. And one of the things that was a happy coincidence was my firm's golf outing, annual golf outing, was scheduled for that Tuesday, October 3rd. And our routine was that we would go to the Harrisburg Country Club and we would have lunch starting around noon, and then we would tee off about 2 o'clock, and then we'd get together again after the round of golf for dinner. So we followed that routine, and we drove up to the Harrisburg Country Club and went into their grill room where they had a large screen TV, and lots of people had packed into the grill room to watch this verdict. And you can imagine the demographic of people that were at the Harrisburg Country Club that day. It was a widely varied crowd, almost every type of white male you can imagine. And And we were sitting there having lunch, and only a couple guys from my firm knew about my wager. The rest of them were oblivious. And we sat there and watched. And when the clerk started to read the verdict, I remember she stumbled over Orenthal James Simpson's name, but she finally got to not guilty. And when she said not guilty, I involuntarily shot up out of my seat and said, yes! And then I looked around the room, and I saw nothing but silence and shocked faces everywhere. And I thought, how am I gonna get out of this? Until I saw one kindred soul across the room. It was an African-American waiter. And he caught my eye, and he gave me a Black Power salute. And I knew right then that any drinking I was gonna do that day was gonna be happy drinking.